joint section 1, section 2 students lab together we are going to have. Okay, all students taken together. We are going to have this lab, and so far, you know, 2 assignments you have done, right? So first the iterative one, then this the concurrent one, right? Okay, so today we are going to have more fun. We are going to play around a little bit more, and we are going to try out some applications, right? So we will develop some application which I'm going to tell you shortly, and we will see how to get you started on the assignment that you are going to get, right? So the details of the assignment I will share with you later on, but first let me give you a little bit of idea about what needs to be done. Okay, so this particular assignment is on developing an FTP application. Okay, so applications basically run on the transport, right? So this FTP protocol basically will run on the transport layer protocols. So we are we although we have not learned about the layering concept yet, at least in section 2 we have not learned, and section 1 also probably it has not been covered. It doesn't matter, but for now it is sufficient for you to know that so application layer protocols basically have to run on transport layer protocols like TCP and UDP. So today's application that you are going to develop, application layer protocol that you are going to implement, is basically the FTP, something called FTP. Excuse me. So I hope that all of you have used FTP in some form or other. So I'm going to tell you what exactly in FTP you will have to implement. So what you have to implement is basically a subset of what the actual FTP protocol looks like. Not only a subset, it's a simplified view of the FTP protocol. So it's much simplified over what the actual FTP protocol looks like and whatever features it has. So we are going to implement that FTP protocol, the simpler version that simpler version of the FTP protocol that we will ask you to in terms of the specific statements. So exactly what kind of requirements, what kind of specifications that protocol is going to have, we'll tell you. Okay. So first, let us take a recap, right? So what we have done so far. So it's all about client server programming, right? So there is a server, there is a client. The server runs continuously, right, offering certain services, and one or more clients basically can access the server and request its services, right? One or more clients, and how they are going to do iteratively, or how they are going to be processed at the server, iteratively or concurrently. So there are multiple different options. So, but the main thing to understand is that logically we are separating the client and the server, right? And so these are two different entities, and they communicate with each other through message passing. So all messages from the clients are going to be passed through the network, through the link to the server, and from the server likewise the responses or whatever are going to be sent over the intermediary network, or any kind of link or channel or whatever to the client. And so for internet type networks, you all have used the AF iNet socket. Okay, and so they have these devices, they have the client and the server, they have their associated IP addresses that are unique to them, and they will be using this TCP or the UDP ports for communication over the channel. Excuse me. So all the network functions, all the network applications at their core are going to use this particular client server model, and this particular model is going to be basically fine tuned to meet the specific requirements of the application that is developed, right? So this is what you have been doing so far in summary. So now coming specifically to the assignment that will be given to you, you have to implement the simplified FTP protocol, right? And let us first understand what the regular FTP protocol provides you, right? So the standard protocol basically that is offered to in the internet for file transfer is basically this file transfer protocol. In short, it is called FTP, right? And this FTP protocol basically uses this particular client server model that I just narrated to you. So you have an FTP server that basically runs and it has different files which are organized in a particular directory structure. And then on the other side you have an FTP client. Okay, so this client basically can connect to the server, and then it can either request the server to transfer certain files to it, or so it can even perform different other different operations, for example uploading and downloading of files, renaming of files. So client can rename file that is existing at the server side, right? So that is called file renaming. It can also, server side, it can instruct the server, the client can instruct to restructure the directory. So like this, actually the different things that the FTP client can do at the server end, okay, by passing suitable messages. Okay, so now this FTP basically enables the different types of devices, heterogeneous devices. They all may not be of the same type, same specification, same running say on the same platform, etc. So FTP basically will enable these heterogeneous devices to share the different types of files over a network using some rules, using some protocol, right? And so FTP can be run over command line, command prompt, so as a command line, FTP can be executed, or even like there are certain GUI support that are also available for running FTP, right? So there are different GUI support, like there are certain tools, right? So these tools are there for Windows, for Linux, so some graphical user interface based tools which can also be used to run FTP, right? Or traditionally with the help of the FTP command in Unix or Linux. So these FTP clients, they have to first authenticate themselves with the server, and then after the authentication is successfully done, these clients can initiate the file transfer process. So the clients, they have to send the request for a particular file that is existing at the server end, and then the server basically will take the necessary action and send the corresponding file back to the client. So this is the basic one. And then, as I said, like file renaming, directory restructuring, etc., etc. Those things can also be done. Now this original FTP, there are two versions of it, which are the secured ones, right? There are two versions of FTP that have been made secure, right? One is called FTPS, where FTP is is executed over the SSL layer, right? SSL is for providing the security. So SSL basically runs over FTP basically runs over SSL, right? So that particular version, that particular protocol, the secured FTP protocol, it is called FTPS. There is another secured implementation of FTP that's over SSH. That's over SSH, and that is called SFTP, right? And both use encryption, etc. All cryptographic methods in order to implement this security. So this FTP architecture looks like this. So you have a client. We are talking about over here. Remember, for the next few moments, whatever we are talking about here is what the regular FTP does, right? Now, what we have asked you to do is a much trimmed down version of this FTP protocol. the original FTP protocol, because this original FTP protocol is much more complex. So a lot of fancy things are done. So here actually, if you start doing it, things will become much more common. And then for the learning sake, we have trimmed down the original FTP, and we have asked you to implement certain commands and certain features. Okay. So this FTP architecture looks like this: that you have a client, you have a server, right? And this client basically over TCP/IP network, it's going to open certain connection, right? So it's going to open a connection and send and execute control processes, right? It is going to execute control processes, okay? And then it is also going to execute the data transfer, right? Now, original FTP basically running the control processes and running the data transfer processes are done over separate channels. So separate channels are created, right? So separate ports basically are there for running this control processes and the data processes, separate ones, right? So separately it is going to be done, separate connection, separate control connection, separate data connection, right? So this is what the original FTP does. So what we have asked you to do is a simplified version of it that I will tell you later on. So so FTP basically is an application layer protocol. It runs on TCP/IP framework, right? And as I said, there are two connections: control connection and the data connection. That control connection basically executes over the TCP port 21, and the data connection executes over TCP port 20. Okay, so two different ports are opened: one for control message passing, the other one is for the data file transfer, right? Data connection, that is over port 20. The control is over port 21 TCP, right? So this is application layer protocol, FTP, and it has to run over some transport layer protocol. It has to run using some transport layer protocol. So it uses the TCP to do it, not UDP, right? So there are different types of FTP operation. That is like one is called the anonymous FTP. There is active FTP. There is passive FTP. So each of them, they have their own different features, right? So they have their own different identity. So in the assignment that we have given you, I will show you shortly. You will need to implement a very simplistic FTP client server communication model. Okay, very simple. Okay. So let me now show you. So any question so far? Okay. So assuming no questions, let me now show you what you have to do. Achha. So let me again reshare. Let me close this one and reshare the assignment here. I hope that the PDF is visible to you.
Yes.
So this is what you have to do. Okay. Now how you will be starting to do that, I will tell you later on. But this is what you are supposed to do. So FTP, kind of FTP, trimmed down FTP, file transfer using sockets. So this is what you have to do, and the deadline is 7th of February. So 7th of February means you are getting roughly 2 weeks. 2 weeks basically. 2 weeks you are getting. Okay. And don't ask for more time, etc., because 2 weeks is more than enough. And so if you are starting to do your work towards the end of the end of this duration, closer to the deadline, then there is a chance that you might not be able to complete up to your satisfaction, and then you might start giving all sorts of excuses, etc. So I don't want you to start your assignment late. So start immediately today, immediately after I finish, right? You start your assignment. So in this assignment, I'm going to read out to you. In this assignment, we will implement a simplified file transfer protocol. The actual working of FTP, as I said, is more complex. So we have a simplified version of FTP to be implemented as part of this assignment. So at the end of your assignment, we expect you to submit a 2.c files. One is the server ftps.c, and the other one is for the client ftp c.c, right? This server, it is specified that it is going to be a concurrent TCP server. This is very important. Don't miss it out. It's going to be a concurrent TCP server. So, and you know by now what is a concurrent TCP server. You have already done your assignment 2 on concurrent TCP server. Now, you will need to set up a few things first. In the directory from which you will run the server program, you need to first create a file called user.txt. Okay, so you understood. So basically, on the server side, right? On the server side, you need to create a program. Create a file whose name you give as user.txt. Now, this file, what it is going to have? So every line of the file will contain one word for the user login name and only one word for the password. So in that order, it is going to be there, the username followed by password with a space in between. And there should be nothing else in the file. And this file is going to have only two users. First is U1, user 1, and the second one is U2, user 2. So U1, let us say that that's the username. U1 space password, one word, is going to be the first entry of that file. Next line, you are going to have U2 space password, one word. That's going to be the second entry. So the passwords can be given arbitrary. So you have to write two programs, I said. One is the two C files, right? One is the client.c, the other one is the server.c. So this is how the client.c is going to look like. So your client.c should give a prompt, my FTP greater than. So this is the command prompt. This is the prompt that the client.c file is going to print. And then it is going to wait for the user comments. So the user will type the comments. What are the comments? That I will tell you shortly. And the comments below will then be sent to the server, except for few comments like the open command, the LCD, and quit. Okay. So at different times, the server may send a code block, a code back to the client. At different times, the server may send a code back to the client. If a command is executed successfully, the server is going to send the code 200. If there is an error, the server is going to send back the code 500. If the client receives an error code, it should print the code along with a text message, error executing command. Otherwise, the client should print command executed successfully. So client sends a command, server processes it. If it is successful, then one set of actions. If it is unsuccessful, another set of actions. Clear? So in both cases, the client gives the prompt again and waits for the next command. So let us say that it is 500, so it is unsuccessful. So that command will be prompted once again. Command will be printed like my FTP greater than, and then the client is going to get another. It will wait for another command from the user. Okay. The client terminates only when the quit command is given. Okay. So these are some of these comments. As I told you, these are some of these comments which are narrated below. Okay. So what are these comments? The first comment is open. So open IP address port. Open IP address space port, right? So this causes the client to open a TCP connection to the server with the designated IP address and port. Open IP address port. This should be the first command that should be entered on the client side. The client should check for it and not accept any other command before this. Clear? The IP address is to be given in dotted decimal form, the standard IP address form. Port should be any number between this and this. This is the choice of the range of ports that are given to you for this assignment. The client prints a text message if the connection is opened successfully. Otherwise, it prints an error message. This is what is the action to be implemented for the open command. Is this clear? So open is for opening a connection, a TCP connection to the server. Right? Two parameters, IP address and port. Next. Now username. This must be the first command sent by the client to the server. The server should first check for this. If any other command is sent as the first command, the server should send an error code of 600. So that means that until the authentication is done with username and password, successfully it is done, any other command should be returned by the server to be an error with the error code 600. Username is going to be the first command. Okay, remember, any other is going to be taken as an error. If the username exists in the user.txt file of the server, a reply code of 200 is sent. If no such user exists, the reply code of 500 is sent. Then the username is successfully entered. Then comes the password. The command for it is password. This must be the second command sent to the server. If any other command is sent as the second command, the server sends an error code 600. If the password matches the user's password specified in the user.txt file, the server sends a reply code 200. If the password does not match, the server sends an error code 500. So you see, that is the reason initially I asked you to create that file user.txt with the username and password. And we are playing with only two username and passwords, right? U1 with password, next slide U2 with password. So this matching is going to be done with the password that is already stored in the password file, in the user.txt file. Sorry, password that is stored against the username in the user.txt file. So those are the few, the first three are the comments that has to be done first. After that, there are other comments 4 to 10 which should be executed only if the username and password have been matched correctly. So both the client and the server should check that before executing any of these commands. If the this matching, basically, what it is saying is that basically this matching has to be done, that successfully username and password have been matched. If the username matches but the password does not, the user must enter both in that order again, not just the password, right? So this is what has to be done. Now, what are these commands 4 to 10? The first one is cd dir name, right? So cd is basically for changing the directory, change directory. So it changes the server side directory to directory name, right? So basically the client is sending the cd directory name as the command to the server. The server receives it, and the process is going to be executed at the server side. The server is going to change the directory to the directory name, the server side directory to the directory name. If the directory change is successful, the server sends a reply code 200. Otherwise, the error code 500. Now, what is this lcd command next? Number 5, lcd directory name. It changes the local client side directory to directory name. Nothing is sent to the server. Local change directory, lcd, local change directory, right? Local client side directory name change will be done by lcd command. dir. The dir shows the contents of the current directory of the server. The client sends the command to the server, and the server sends the directory content to the client. Then comes what? The get command, get and put. Okay. So let us understand this get command. Get remote file, local file. So remote file is basically the server side file, and local file is basically the client side file. So if both of these file names can be just a file name, in which case it must exist on the current directory in the server, or there can be an absolute path named to the file. For example, like this. This is basically the complete path, the absolute path, or there can be absolute. Now the file, basically the file name cannot be relative to the current directory or parent directory in this application. So you cannot start with dot something or double dot, as you do in like typical Unix commands, right? So if any file with the name local file already exists in the client, it is going to be overwritten. The client would first check if it can open the local file for writing. If not, a message is printed and no command is sent to the server. Otherwise, the command is sent. If the remote file does not exist on the server, it sends an error code 500 to the client and transfers nothing. Otherwise, the server first sends the code 200, signifying that it is successful, and followed by which it is going to send the contents of the file in the format that we had specified earlier. Now, this is the getting the file, right? Now put the local file to the remote file, right? So it puts the file named local file from the local directory of the client to the remote file existing in the server. The file names are similar to that in the get command. If any file with the name remote file already exists on the server, it is overwritten. The client first checks if it can open the local file for reading. If not, a message is printed and no command is sent to the server. Otherwise, the command is sent. If the server is able to open the remote file, it sends a code 200. The client then transfers the file to the file in the format that is specified later. If the server is unable to open the remote file for some reason, it sends the error code 500 and the client sends nothing. So these small steps that are given to you, each of these you will have to understand carefully and you will have to implement as part of the implementation of a particular command. Now another command is named as mget. Now what this mget is going to do, the arguments that it is going to take, the mget command, are the different file names, file1, file2, etc. So this mget file1, file2, etc., this command will get a set of files that are given by the file names file1, file2, etc. From the server. It is going to get a set of files. And these are then going to be copied to the current directory on the client under the same name. The file name convention is the same as in get and put. The command fails if any of the file transfers fails, right? This command is to be executed by sending the get command multiple times with the proper arguments. Now this mput, so mget we have got for multiple files, right? Set of files. Mput is also similar, same behavior as mget, just that it puts the files from the client onto the current directory of the server, wherever the server is, in whichever directory it is, basically. So this file that is transferred, multiple files that are transferred from the client are all going to be put on that particular directory. So this command is to be executed by sending the put command several times with the proper arguments. Now, the quit command. This quit command basically is used to quit. That means to close the connection if it is open and if it exists, and then it is going to exit. So those were the commands 1 through 10 and the quit 11th one. Now let us take a few reads of the instruction so that you understand how to proceed further. So the file transfer does not happen in one step when the file is arbitrarily long. Remember this thing. If you have a file which is quite long or whatever, you need to do something. You need to break it into small pieces, right? So the file is then sent in such a case in the binary mode as a sequence of bytes, and this transfer is going to take place block by block. So each block is prefixed with a header containing two fields, a character where L indicates it is the last block of the file, and a character M and a character M. So small typos are there. Anyways, I think you can figure it out. And a character M indicating that it is not the last block of the file and more blocks will follow. And a 16-bit integer, short integer, indicating the length in bytes and the data that is sent in this block. So a file transfer is over after a block with L in the character field is received. So how do you know the last block has been received? You look out for the character L, the last block. So that will be signifying the last block. So a file transfer is over after a block with L in the character field is received. Note that this check is sufficient for detecting the end of the file, as TCP ensures that data bytes are received in order. TCP ensures that the data bytes are received in order. Okay. Thus, the sender of the file will read the file block by block, prefix it with a header, and send it with the send call. So 3 points are worth noting. Number 1, because we are using the TCP connection underneath, there is no guarantee that the entire block will reach together to the other side. So you should take care of that. You should so this one actually anyway, so this needs to okay, but I think overall actually it should not affect much. But so the second one is that you should also take care of the fact that the architectures on both sides may be different. The third one is that the files can contain anything, and you should not assume that the files contain only text. These are basically text files. You should not assume that. The commands are to be sent exactly as shown as null terminated strings from the client to the server, except for open, which is for opening a connection, where there is no command to be sent to the server. So the other one is LCD and the mget input. You should note that any FTP client should work with any FTP server. Okay, this is very important. Not necessarily that whether it is written by the same group or not. So I can take your FTP client and I should be able to use it with the FTP server that is written by another group. So this is very crucial, and you need to do some generic implementations accordingly. So you should carefully read the specifications and you should follow them strictly, not just someone make your own client and server work together. It should be generic enough, okay, to be used by any. So any client with any server should be able to work, right? Any of your friends. So servers that are written as part of servers or clients that are written as part of the assignments, obviously, right? So not the actual ones. So the protocol specification is important for interoperability. In the real world, different entities write the client and the server respectively. If you see any ambiguity or incomplete specification anywhere that may make a client not work with an arbitrary server, please let us know. Now the submission instruction: 2 C files to be submitted, FTP s.c for the server and FTP c.c for the client. Okay, and this should be submitted in Moodle as a single zip file. Very important. Okay, so this is basically your assignment. This is your assignment to be done. So any question on the assignment?
Sir, what is the meaning of red call near where you wrote we have to send the file block by block?
Which one is it?
Sending file block by block. We wrote with red call. What is the meaning of red call?
Red call. What is red call? File is sent binary mode as a sequence of block by block.
In the end of the paragraph, sir.
End of the paragraph. Acha. Okay, so ignore that. But I think it is written over here. So it is. Acha, you start implementing this way. Then So this should be sufficient. Actually, you don't need to be worried about what is rate call. Okay. So yeah. Okay. So this should be sufficient. Acha, okay, I know. There is a typo over here. I think it should be read call. So read call and send call. So anyway, so I will just cross check once again, and yeah. So that's all you have to do. Any other question? Is a nice observation that you had.
Sir, what would be the format of the how would the server know that the command has ended? Because some commands like input and mget can be arbitrarily long.
Yeah, so that is what. No? So all these things you will have to consider. Very right. I mean, so you are basically starting to think. So you think about how you are going to implement that, right? And that is why things like these small things, basically you will have to take care. And that is why you have you have been given such a long time, right? So think about how you are going to implement that, right? So if it is taking many files, etc., right? So when it is going to end, how you are going to implement that, etc. So think about it. That's part of your assignment.
So, sir, in all probability, like between different groups, the servers won't be interoperable because we will make different assumptions as to how the commands will go.
No. So you tell us that what assumptions you are talking about. There is no, everything is very clearly written. But small things like if you find anything, do let us know. Okay, so send us an email, then we'll think about it and we'll respond back. No, the whole idea about the whole idea of this thing is that what it is meant is that it should be generic enough, right? So that is the whole purpose, why it is written that any client with any server, you should not make it like you should not have any code tweaks, etc., to work only with your your own server, for example, or your own client, right? So this generic implementation should be followed the way it is specified over here. Achha. So you all start working on it, and